Well, it's the top of the hour. Let's get started for the day. This, of course, is the Budgeting and Farm Income 2020 and 21 webinar. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. I'll be your moderator for the day. We're joined by Dale Lattz and Gary Schnitkey, both here on the Urbana-Champaign campus of the U of I, to take us through the next half hour or so. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. I don't know which of the two of you is actually starting for the day, so I'll let you pick up. Maybe, Gary, are you taking off first?
This is Gary Schnitkey, and I'm gonna start us off, and we are going to start us off with a poll here right off the bat. So Jim's going to get the poll up here. So was it a good move to cancel Big Ten football this year? So you got several options there. So what do we have to say? And this is going to sort of gauge the feel of our audience.
Gary, is this relevant to the topic?
It is relevant. It may not be relevant, totally relevant to this topic.
I don't get to vote.
Answers there, I see.
So yeah, there's 3 no's there, but
that's the quickest set of answers I've ever seen come in.
Yeah. So actually, it's sort of interesting to see what people think about this. Obviously, this is part of our control measures, and we'll be done with the poll now. We will show you the answers right now. 51%. So this is a 50-50. We can't get any closer. 51 thought it was a prudent decision. 26 play it without fans. 14 play it with fans, and no, try it again later. So it gives you a feel for what people are thinking about, and we are now a divided country. So. So appreciate that time. What we're going to do here today is go over 3 topics. We're going to start here with revenue. So what we're setting up, and we're going to do budgeting for 2020 and 2021, give you a feel for what it looks like. So we'll do the revenue side, yield, prices, commodity, title, crop insurance, CFAP, WIP, and other things. Then we'll go to our budgets, and then finally we'll come to everybody's favorite topic, cutting costs. So there we go. So that's the outline today, and we'll start with revenue.
Yeah, Gary, that's fine. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Ms. Dale Lattz. As we talk about revenue, of course, on grain farms, the main components are yields and prices, and for the last couple of years, other ad hoc income, I guess we can say, from the government. We did have our first objective yield survey results for the states come out here not too long ago, and this was touched on, I believe, on Tuesday's webinar also. But you can see for Illinois, the first estimate for corn is 207 bushel per acre, and you can see the dark line is the trend line over time, and then the red is the actual yield. At the bottom is the deviation from trend. And you can see for 2007 that 207 bushel per acre, that would be 16 bushel per acre above trend. So generally speaking, we're looking at very good yields, at least the early estimates. And I believe the 207 bushel per acre would be the second highest on record for Illinois, going back to 2018, I think was the highest, but very close. So we're looking at generally good yields across the state. If we look at the next slide, we'll have the same figures up there for the soybean yield in Illinois. The first estimate is 64 bushel per acre statewide. Again, I believe that's the second highest to 2018, and 8 bushel above trend. As in corn, and especially soybeans, if you look down at the deviation from trend, we've been above deviation most of the last 6-7 years, except for 2019 when we had the wet year, but otherwise significantly above on soybeans, above trend yield. So from a yield standpoint for this year, we're looking at very good corn and soybean yields, which is kind of amazing considering how things started out. It was a cold, wet spring, which a lot of them are, but things were really held back for a month, but then it changed and we had that warm weather and adequate rainfall, too much rainfall in some areas. But from a yield standpoint, it seems like we're looking pretty good across the state, Gary.
Yep. And again, we're going to be building those into our 2020 crop budgets that we're looking at above trend yields. The same day when they released state yields, they also WASDE released its report. They had 181.8 bushel per acre national yield, and their estimates of the 2020 market year price was 360, and the 2021 crop was 310. So the 2021 crop is a very low price, $3.10. Market year price for soybeans, $8.55, $8.35. As we're looking at it, we're coming in there. We're about the same places where they were, so we're looking at roughly the same sort of prices that they were. If anything, they're a bit more optimistic on soybeans, and we're a bit more pessimistic on corn. There is a discrepancy here, though, if you're looking at those prices, and there is a current discrepancy on soybeans. We have what compared to those estimates would be what we would consider to be very good prices. $3.15 per bushel for corn is current fall delivery bid, which is consistent with the prices that USDA WASDE is projecting, and $8.90 per bushel for soybeans. The $8.90 is well above what USDA is saying, and you can see by the recent chart that we've seen pretty good increases in soybean prices here in recent times, at least from the November 2012 contract basis. So there we are. We have soybeans above what we're projecting. That might represent a buying or selling opportunity. In any case, if we did happen to see $8.90 per bushel soybeans, we're going to use a lower price in our budgets for 2020 and 2020. So if we actually, in fact, did see those prices, that would be a very, 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 very good year for incomes on soybeans.
So as we talk about revenue, we talk about yields and prices. Of course, one of the other things that's coming into play is our government program, and this seems like ages ago, but was this spring, late winter, early spring, that we had to sign up for the new farm program, and just reminding us all on that, what we signed up for actually started in 2019. And we signed up for choices for 2019 and 2020. So we had choices there with ARC or PLC were the main ones, and a couple other ARC IC. The general recommendations we were making at that time, and I think still turn out to be good recommendations for corn. We were talking about looking at PLC as the best choice. That was due to the fact that we were closer to the reference price at that time, or the likelihood of maybe falling under the reference price, trigger payments, was closer for corn than soybeans. And that still looks like a good choice actually now, especially as prices have come down from when we were making those decisions. Soybeans, we were more looking at the ARC County maybe as the better choice, because soybeans were quite above the reference price at that point in time. And that looks like a good choice also. Wheat, it was more obvious that PLC was the best choice, which is still the case. And then ARC IC, we talked about quite a bit in certain instances on certain locations in the state that may have had prevent plan or things like that. And that seems like that still would have been a good choice. So those recommendations kind of still hold true, I guess, Gary. And if we look at 2019, so we're talking about 2019 ARC and PLC payments, which would be received in October of this year. Remember, there's a delay in that due to the fact that they have to wait to the end of the marketing year. And for corn and soybeans, the marketing year ends within 2 weeks here, 10 days, at the end of August. So the 2019 crop marketing year will be ending at the end of this month. So we have just about a complete set of data in to estimate what the marketing year average price will be for the 19 crop. And we're looking right now at the WASDE estimate was $3.60. The effective reference price for corn for PLC was $3.70. So that would indicate a payment of 10 cents per bushel. And you can see the math there at the bottom of the slide. If we had 175 bushel PLC yield at 10 cents a bushel, and you get paid on 85% of your base acres, we're factoring in a sequester reduction there. So we would get 0.932 of that total payment. And that comes out to around $14 or so per base acre. When we were doing these discussions in the wintertime, we were basically saying we weren't estimating any payments probably for corn or soybeans due to the fact of higher prices at that time. That was pre-COVID, if you will. So we're looking at possibly a small payment for PLC if you signed up for corn for the 2019 crop year, which will be paid here in October. Moving ahead for soybeans, Look at the same type of math here. The marketing year average price at this point in time for 19 is $8.55, which is above the effective reference price, which would mean if you had signed up for PLC for soybeans, we're not expecting any payments due to the fact that the marketing year price will be above the effective reference price. But we did talk about choosing our county as maybe the better choice for soybeans because of the price level factor. And Gary had kind of put together on the right there, you can see the estimates, and these are estimates right now for various counties in the state of Illinois, estimated ARC county payments. And you can see we do have a number of counties that could be triggering payments based on, that brings into effect yield and prices when we do that math. And actually, it looks like, Gary, right now we're seeing in a county that would have the highest payment estimated at this point in time for Champaign County of $56 per acre.
But the next county over is zero.
Yeah.
So
The county I live in is zero. That doesn't seem right. But anyway, that's the way it is. But we look at estimating a fair number of counties having pretty sizable payments.
and then it's going to be a large payment or a very small payment, obviously. So that's going to vary a lot. But so depending on where you're at, those are 2019 ARC County payments coming in October could be a significant cash flow, and in the other cases not.
Right. One thing we weren't really planning on half a year ago or so, pre-COVID, I guess you could say, but the drop in prices and so forth, they're triggering some payments. Again, those will be made in October of this year, 2020, or the estimate. Looking ahead to 2020, so the crop year we're in right now, the preliminary look at our PLC type of payments. Again, these would not be received if payments are made until next October of 21. And again, we talk about a marketing year average price here for corn and soybeans. Remember, we haven't started the marketing year yet for this 2020 crop. So these are preliminary estimates based on the WASDE report and so forth. But if we do have good crops and corn prices, for example, stay down at that level, again, the effective reference price is $3.70. The early estimate on a marketing year average price is $3.10. That would be 60 cents per bushel payment rate at 175 bushel if you had a PLC yield. And again, every farm's different, but if your PLC yield was 175 bushel per acre, doing the math down there at the bottom, that would be about an $80+ payment per acre. So that could be very sizable if prices do stay down at those levels. You can see the same math for soybeans. Again, with the estimated marketing year average price of $8.35, the effective reference price was $8.40. So a nickel would be the only payment rate. And again, using the math, if you had a 50 bushel per acre PLC yield, you can see a very small payment of $2 per acre. Again, those are just early estimates for the 2020 crop year based on some early estimates of marketing year average prices and so forth. So if you kind of want to do some budgeting based on that, we've kind of put together a calculation, kind of a weighted average, looking at what kind of corn and soybean bases are in the state, kind of average that out. You can see the math down there. And this is kind of the basis for some, when we look at our budgets here in a little bit of a payment, our PLC payment for the 2020 crop of an average over all the acres of $45 per acre. Again, that's preliminary at this point in time, but based with the best information we know on prices or the early estimate of prices for the upcoming marketing year.
So the crop insurance, this year we had our crop insurance guarantee set $3.88 was the projected price for corn, $9.17. Price for soybeans and that $3.88 for corn was roughly the same, a little bit lower than it has been in recent years, $9.17. For soybeans, we're down from 2017, 2018, and 2019. Again, looking at those, the crop insurance guarantees are based on February settlement prices of the CME contracts, Dece for corn, November for soybeans, and those were lower this year. Here you see the break-even prices for both corn and soybeans. Take the $3.88 projected price for corn
85% coverage level, the break-even price would be $3.30. That would mean that if prices were below $3.30, or the settlement or the November or the harvest price comes in below $3.30, we would get a payment if, and this is the big if the harvest yield was equal to the guarantee yield. Well, if you're looking at prices right now, they're really close to that $3.30. They're a little bit above it, actually. But our yields, particularly in northern, probably central Illinois, are going to be much higher than our trend-adjusted yield, so there's probably not going to be any payments on corn. Soybeans, $9.17. The 85% break-even price is $7.88. We're not there. We're in the mid or much higher than that, and our yields are going to be higher as well. So crop insurance this year across Illinois is not going to make large payments. Again, good yields are likely going to cover that. That will be different, obviously, than Iowa, where we've seen the recent windstorm, and perhaps those farmers will be getting crop insurance payments as their yields have suffered there. We'll have to wait and see.
We could have isolated cases in northern Illinois too, where we obviously had some wind damage also. So there could be particular areas of the state, smaller areas of the state, or farms in the central and northern areas that did have the wind damage where it significantly hurt yields or may not even be able to harvest. That could kick in some crop insurance and some isolated cases like that. As far as looking at some other revenue for this year, as we talk about projecting incomes and budgets and so forth, again, we had the CFAP program initiated as part of the COVID legislation that was passed, and you can kind of see the information there. They did extend the deadline for filing for this to September 11th. That originally, I believe, was an August deadline date, so that's been extended. And see for grain, it's paid on the lower of 50% of your 2019 production or unpriced inventory as of January 15th. The rates there, it was a kind of combined rate because it was coming out of two sources, but basically 33.5 cents on corn and 47.5 cents on soybeans. They initially paid 80% of that payment due to the fact they wanted to be sure they had enough funds to cover everybody. It looks like that is the case. The 20% is actually starting being paid. I'm realized that some of the areas in the state or some of the counties that has already been processed and in the bank for some producers. So it looks like we will be getting that 20% for that second part of the CFAP payment. And again, just an example of that, if you had a 208 bushel yield in 2019, 45, again, we're just making estimates here. If you had 45% inventory at 33.5 cents per bushel price, that would be $31 per acre on that for corn. If we look at the same thing for soybeans, again, a 64 bushel yield, if you had that and 45% inventory or unpriced at January 15th at that payment rate, that would be $14. So again, depending on where you're at on marking your crop on January 15th, probably a lot of producers or maybe most producers had some inventory or some unpriced grain at that point in time. And if they did, then they would be receiving some of these CFAP payments or had received these already and getting the 20% here this week or next week, hopefully.
So we got another poll for you, and we'll begin this poll right now. And obviously, we're expecting some more federal aid. The CFAP program was actually for losses on the 2019 crop. So what happened in 2019 crop was what the CFAP payments were originally designed to cover those losses associated with COVID-19 or the coronavirus social distancing measures. We are somewhat anticipating that there will be another payment, so we're asking you, but that's been that there has been no USDA action on that, nor has there been any congressional action on that. And according to last Tuesday's webinar, and go back and look at our that archive, that's a cloudy situation at best. So we're asking you what you think. And here, let's close the poll, and here is what your answer is. We're bringing this up there right now. 29% of you expect no payments going on in the future. 33% of you expect $0 to $25. 29%, 25 to 50, and 10% of you expect something over $50. So that's pretty wide variation there. So,
But
but
there's about 70% expecting some type of payment for 2020
20.
crop. Yes.
So yes, this is for 2020 crop. So we'll this is for continuing 2020 crop. We have other federal aid out there, WIP Plus. We would suggest if you're a farmer and you haven't signed up for that or at your FSA office, you do so. Paycheck Protection Program has been out there, and a number of farmers have taken advantage of PPP. EIDL has been out there as well, and a number of farmers, quite a few farmers probably have taken advantage of both of those PPP and EIDL programs. And again, there could be another additional CFAP or MFP payment on the 2020 crop. So we'll wait and see what that may be, but we're going to put something in there in our budgets.
Yeah, that's one thing to consider, that we don't think about, like the PPP program. If one's taking that loan out and pays it for the appropriate expenses and gets the loan forgiven, then that's kind of additional income, if you will. And the same with the EIDL part of that. There's some added sources of revenue that we don't normally think about due to these additional programs that come into play.
So now we've covered what we consider the revenue items that are going to be impacting the 2020 and 2021 crop. We're going to give you a look at our budgets. So here they go. So you see the 2018 and 2019 there for both corn and soybeans. The 2018 and 2019 are actual results. So those have happened already. We are putting our CFAP payment. You will note that there's a CFAP payment in there for $31 for corn and $14 for soybeans. We're putting that on the 2019 crop because that was meant to compensate for losses on the 2019 crop. So even though it was received in 2020, we're putting that on the 2019 crop. So let's look at 2020. We built in here 233 bushel yield for corn, 73 bushel for yield for soybeans. So we're putting those up there roughly pretty close to what 2018 yields were. 233 is almost equal to 2018 yield for corn, 73 for soybeans, almost 2018 yields. Again, if we look at what the state is saying for yields, they're just a tad bit below those what is being said for 2018. 320 price for corn, 845 price for soybeans. They're close to what WASDE is reporting with a little bit of increase because Illinois typically has a little bit higher price. Other thing I would note, 845 for soybeans, you can price it for closer to 890 right now. So depending on how I don't know if you look at it, 890 is a good price, but it's better than 845. So maybe take advantage of some of those buying opportunities, or you look at it as a selling opportunity. So those are the prices and yields that we're using for 2020. We were more optimistic about CFAP, continued CFAP, than our survey suggested we should be, but we put $50 in there. So $50 for both corn and soybeans. Didn't have any. So if you answered the last poll question and you were 0, you would take that $50 away. If you were $25, you would be putting $25 in there. You can see there that we have 746 and for crop revenue, $45 for ARC and PLC payments, and we're putting the same number on both corn and soybeans. We do that because it's based on base acres. It's not planted acres, so it's a blended, just like Dale showed in that slide before that, that's where that number comes from. You can see there that the gross revenue is below 2019, and also for corn, 843 versus 901, 714 is a bit higher for soybeans. 571 is our non-land cost for corn, 359 for soybeans, and
that gives us an operator and land, which are both down a bit from last year. $272 for an operator and land return for corn, $355 for soybeans, and we put the same cash rent in that we did last year, $275, and obviously that varies across operations. That's a minus $3 farmer return for corn, $80 for soybeans. And again, I would say, remember that that is premised on getting a $50 additional payment here for some sort of federal aid. Where that leaves us, and there at the bottom, we did this for 2018, 2019, and 2020. Looking at that for a 50-50 corn soybean rotations, 104 in 2018, 22 in 2019, $39 for 2020. And again, $39 is higher than last year, but remember there's $50 of additional payments in there. If we didn't have any additional payment, it'd be minus 12. So basing that on additional federal aid, just the big point that we all know, the past several years, MFPs and CFAPs have been really critical in coming up with
Just a couple comments on Gary as a look at that. Our audience needs to remember on ARC PLC, we are tying the payment to the year the crop is. So again, for ARC PLC, for example, that 2019 figure in there is actually getting paid, or whatever it is, will get paid this fall in 2020. And that $45, would be estimated at this point, but not paid till next fall. So we're kind of doing some, I guess you could call it accrual accounting and trying to match that revenue to the crop. The same thing with the CPAP payment, that $31 and $14 was paid this year, but it was tied back to the 2019 crop. And again, the other big point, that $50, we don't have any insight on that. That's just a best guesstimate at this point in time. So just some comments on that. I suppose the drop in the non-land costs mainly, of course, last year on corn especially would have had high drying costs, which this year looks like we'll be back down to a little more normal from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why non-land costs are going down. So we're ready to go on to 2021. So we got a couple questions for you. By the way, got a poll question for you. All right, this is this is going to be key for setting up 2021. So if we look at 2021, what we would be putting as a trend yield for Central Illinois is 217 bushels per acre, and we're just taking trend yields and putting a straight line through it. 2020 yield is actually likely to be closer to 233 bushels per acre. If you're doing our budgeting, what would you be using for our yield? Would you be losing something less than 217? 217, which is our trend yield, something between 217 and 233. 233 is our estimate right now, this year's yield, and over 233. So take that poll. This is going to play into our 2021 budget. So what yield should we be using here? You tell us what you think, and almost 54% of you have voted. If you just, we're going to close the poll, and here's what you guys said. Coming up here, 14% said less. So a third of you, roughly a third, 36% said we should use 217. 38% said something between 217 and 233, 7% and 5%. This is actually a pretty key number as you're budgeting every year. And as those slides originally showed, we've been above trend for the last several years. Maybe something's happened in our hybrids or whatever, but we've been above trend. The next question, and again, all right, so this is 2021. So and if we can start the poll here, what do you think we should be putting in our budgets for 2021 with relative to CFAP or MFP? So should we be putting, and just give us a number here, what do you expect CFAP and MFP to be looking at? And again, both of these numbers are going to be key into our budgeting. Do you expect continued federal aid, ad hoc? So we're calling this ad hoc because it is not part of the commodity title.
There's no guarantee of it from 1 year or next, and it's not part of crop insurance. So we're going to close the poll here. And here's what you said. 29% of you said nothing. Almost 50%, $25, less 0 to 25. 20% of you thought 25 to 50. And then there's 1% of you thought over $50 per acre. So that'll give you a feel, but let's set this up. So that's what you said. We're going to give you two scenarios. Baseline, our trend yields, and no ad hoc disaster assistance. So that'd be my dismal budgets, which everybody says that I'm pessimistic on. So here's that's Mr. Pessimism there. Then the optimistic, we're going to have above trend yields and $50 of ad hoc disaster.
And no lowering of commodity prices.
And no, because we're going to have a Durango or whatever it was.
You've seen the light and you're optimistic.
I'm optimistic. So here's what that would look like. That would be, this is the baseline scenario. 217, 340 is we're coming back. 340, we're coming back. We're getting better prices, minus $73 per acre for farmer return at a 275 cash rent. So we're saying keeping cash rent the same, non-land costs are coming down.
And you are figuring some ARC PLC in there.
We're
based on those
still
price levels.
And we're still still considering ARC PLC, no CFAP, no MFP, where we put 0. So minus 73 for corn, minus 18 for soybeans. And we continue this even in the heart of the corn belt. Soybeans are more profitable or less negative than corn. So and again, what that would look like, farmer return going into 2021, that would be a minus 46, which would be worse than recent years, obviously. So that would be a bad income scenario. All right, now we're going to get optimistic on you. And here, this budget does two things. We put our yields at the same as before, did not lower prices and then put $50 in there. And and that gets us to $53 of return and $3 of without ad hoc federal payments. So, with those two scenarios would get us sort of back to where we were and keep us where we were. So we have to have above trend yields next year and some sort of ad hoc disaster. We put in $50 in there. So that'll give you a feel. So now we turn to everybody's favorite.
Yeah, we'll just talk a little bit about costs. We've been basically spending all the time so far on the revenue side for the most part. And now let's look a little bit at costs. We can see we've generally had increasing, this slide shows total non-land costs on the higher productive soils. As we had the high income period, that led to a run up in costs in certain cost areas or a lot of the cost areas. And what we see is, and this happens before in down income years, even when we do have things turn around and lower incomes, we really don't see costs go down. At best, they kind of stay level. There are certain costs that do go down. Fertilizer, I view that almost a little more as a commodity that does go up and down, but your other crop costs, pesticides and seed, best it seems like they level off. We don't see much significant drop in those. Power costs the same way. Fuel, we have some variability, but fuel is a smaller part of the whole pie anymore. So again, as we mentioned there, we've kind of come down a little bit from our peak, but again, it's been extremely difficult to lower costs significantly enough to have a big impact on the bottom line. So again, that's where we're at on that as far as components of the costs. We're kind of showing here. Gary, if you want to move along, you can see fertilizer over time. Again, this is cost per acre. And that's our fertilizer cost per acre. And kind of putting in the other ones, our pesticides, be our chemicals. You can see we're up to $76 per acre. Let's see, is this for corn, Gary, or is this an average?
Corn.
Okay, corn costs, and you can see $114 per acre for seeds. Seeds been flat for 3 or 4 years after that increase. The chemicals, less of an increase, kind of flat. We are probably seeing a little more application in certain years of some foliar, things like that and so forth added to it. Again, the fertilizer is a little more variable one from that standpoint. So again, not a lot of control on some of those. And then there's the power costs that we come in there, which is kind of leveled off. Some of that increase was in depreciation and some of the changes there from tax laws, but that's kind of where the major components of our, and this is cost break for corn, making up those non-land costs.
We had a question why we're projecting lower cost, and two things from 2019 to 2020. Drying costs were very much higher in 2019 than 2020. And we also projected a lower fertilizer cost in 2020 and then in 2019. If you're looking at 2021, we were projecting almost the same non-line costs. So non-line costs were about the same in 2021 as they were in 2019. We would suggest, all right, so the cost cutting area, maybe one of the areas that we can look at is in the fertilizer applications area, and we come up with that suggestion for a couple of reasons. One is if we look at MRTN rates, or those that are university recommendations, and if you go to their corn nitrogen rate calculator, you will get our N rates, and note this is based on work done at the University of Illinois, Emerson Knapsinger, et cetera. You can see that our nitrogen recommendations there for Central Illinois is 174 for anhydrous ammonia, 163 for 28%. And in Northern Illinois is lower than that. Southern Illinois is higher than that. If we have, and those rates are designed to be the maximum economic return. And if we look at PCM data over time, and here you're seeing here different amounts of N applied, and our yields from that you can see there is a slight trend up, but you can see that there's not much of a relationship between yields and N rates, particularly after you get past that MRTN rate. So that's one area where we may be looking at, could be looking at cost reductions as well as P and K applications. Here a couple of years ago, they lowered what the universities estimated as the removal rates per bushel. Those were lower than what was previously in the Illinois Agronomy Guide, 15% lower for corn, 10 to 12% lower for soybeans, a $4 to $10 per acre savings if we in fact implement those and are close to the soil test levels needed to maintain yields. Final poll of the day. What do you expect cash rents to do? So Dale's going to tell you what they should do. But we got a poll for you. What do you think cash rents will look like in 2021 versus 2020? So if you wouldn't mind answering this, this is the question that we ask. And again, cash rents are a big percent of the cost of corn and soybean production. So we want to get a feel for what you're thinking about as far as looking at cash rents for the coming year. Here's your results. 56% of you today say the same. 30% think down $0 to $10, down $10 to $20, and down. So most of you think staying the same or modest levels of decreases here. Let me pull this back up again. And this is just showing where we're at here for operator and land returns and cash rents. Just a point, and again, everybody knows this, is that since 2013, cash returns from cash rents have been much lower than in the previous period. And in the recent several years, 2018, 2019, and 2020, we've seen those ad hoc disaster assistance or federal aid 20 MFPs and CFAP payments being an important part of the total. So, and again, flat rents and other costs and those CFAP payments have been an important part of the total return. And if you don't put any return in there, then you see what you get for 2021. And obviously, and that's the same look at what we're looking at as far as our budgets. So to summarize here, MFPs and CFAPs have greatly aided farm income since 2018. Again, 2020 and 21, looking at without federal aid, it would be a poor year. With that federal aid, we may see incomes roughly the same in 2020 that we were looking at in 2019. Moving forward to 2021, we have to see a continuation above trend yields, and again, another payment of federal payment for ad hoc programs, MFPs and CFAPs. We might want to evaluate our nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium applications, and again, be careful with cash rents. We will have a webinar on Tuesday talking about farmland prices and the relative resiliency. So that webinar will be on Tuesday, August 25th, and then we'll have a final one on August 28th talking about where we are at financially on Illinois farms. So,
and because they should already be signed up for those because it's a series, so they don't need to sign up again, but they should tell their friends, Gary, right? So, yeah, and they can get them signed up as well. Our thanks, of course, go to Gary Schnitkey and Dale Lattz for everything they've done here today. Take a moment, write some questions out. We'll get them answered for you. I do want to also thank the sponsors of this particular series. They include TIA, the Center for Farmland Research. That's right here on the Urbana-Champaign campus of the University of Illinois. You can find it at farmland.illinois.edu. Compeer Financial, Farm Credit Illinois, Growmark, and of course the Illinois Corn Growers Association, all working to help us provide this information to you. I think we'll get right to a series of questions for you. And I want to know very quickly from you, Gary, as you look into the fall, I was thinking about the cost saving measures and what are the big costs on the farm that whether they're equipment or crop rotation or tillage passes or those sorts of things that producers can do to try to mitigate any of the costs that they're possibly can get rid of in the fall time frame.
yeah, so this is always the question, and frankly, it's given where we see on non-line costs, they don't come down easily, and just let's be straight up, it's hard to cut cost on farms. So we come back though to that fertilizer decision and maybe evaluating where we're at on the nitrogen side. That won't help with 2020, but in 2021, those MRTNs are much lower than we see a lot of farmers, particularly for nitrogen, applying out there. I would also mention a long-term look at machinery, and machinery has to be looked at in a long-term basis. And whenever we look at more profitable versus less profitable farm, machinery management becomes key in that. And matching the equipment with the size is always a key. Again, coming up with cost savings is hard. Otherwise, we would have done it already, right? So, but we keep keep looking at those things. So, and obviously cash rents are another thing, but
Yeah, one of the questions, Gary, that came up there is any ideas or assistance in negotiating rents with landowners. Of course, that's a very tough situation. And we talk about cash rent levels. The first thing we need to talk about in any specific case is where you're coming from. You know, we can make a general blanket statement that rents ought to come down, but given the current economic conditions. But again, we need to know where you're starting from. I think, you know, if I was out there as an operator, I would just try to document what's actually going on in terms of income and the expenses I'm incurring. just to kind of show what's left over for rent or rent as part of that, of course, and just seeing, where we're at today, what we're projecting, how important these ad hoc payments are the last couple of years. There's no guarantee on any of that going forward. But if those aren't there, as you indicated, the bottom line would be quite a bit different. There are very significant income levels here last year, this year maybe, and maybe next year. But again, just trying to document the best you can, putting down the actual numbers of what the operator is making or not making on specific leases and so forth. And we've talked about variable cash rent leases for those that are in cash rent situations. We've seen a lot of that pick up over the last 10 or 15 years. That's helped a lot, I think, and mitigate some of the risk for operators that are in cash renting ground. Those that have variable cash rents, though, when I was in lending, one of the things you did see is you still need to maybe, even though have a variable rent, go back and look at the terms of that variable rent agreement. Things do change over time, and even if it's a variable rent, adjusting to the current economics, some of the things might need to be adjusted. For example, the bases. A lot of times I've seen the bases maybe too high. They were fine when we had good income years, but now those bases, the minimum or base is, 275 or 300, maybe it ought to be 200 or 250 or something like that.
Yeah.
So those are the type of things that might need to be tweaked from time to time as the economics change out there.
Yeah, and again, on the variable cash rents, they are a very good tool, but if you have a $300 base rent, it's not reducing risk for the farmer. At $200 is more where we're at. Any idea of the weather forecast for the next couple of weeks? Whenever I look at the weather forecast, it looks pretty dry for the next several weeks. So that's the weather forecast that I would be looking at. I don't know if that's going to have a significant impact on yields. We're getting
this time of the year that beans can still be rain. The corn's probably is pretty close to what it is, but good rains right now will still help much of the bean crop, and hopefully we'll get something before it's too late for beans.
Yeah.
Might I suggest that they visit the willag.org, willag.org website? I talked to 5 of the best agricultural meteorologists in the business each day of the week, a different one. I've already had the discussion with Eric Snodgrass from Nutrient Ag Solutions and Agrable for today. So I know next week's dry. The models are telling him that it's kind of a toss-up for the following week about whether it's hot or whether it's cool, but it is probably wet in that process. So we'll see whether that comes to fruition. Weather, of course, farther than 10 days out gets pretty tough to move along. So if they could head there are other questions that probably should be answered as well. Here, anybody know the percent of cropland that's irrigated by region? I don't have that one off the top of my head.
It's pretty low. Low. I don't.
In Illinois, there's just basically a couple, 2 or 3 areas in the state, that probably the majority of the irrigation is. The ag statistics will probably have some information maybe on that, or the recent ag census that came out, but I wouldn't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah. So will margin protection be worth the extra premium this year, or need to add an extra pricing window, a straight buyout product to raise the base price? I would tell you that margin, I would take a look at margin protection, and it's going to vary by the county you're in. There's the rates on margin protection vary across counties quite a bit. Margin protection will provide 95% protection, and as its name says, it's a margin. It takes into consideration projected price during this time of the year, so it's going to be lower than perhaps you want the projected price to be. But looking at the 2021 crop, but you can buy at a 95% coverage level, and it will be based on margin, and you can still buy an underlying combo product with it. So it's worth a look. Take a look at it. A lot of people are going to look at the premium though and say it's pretty expensive. And yeah, you're gonna at the minimum being paid $25-30 per acre when all is said and done. So take a look, think about it, and think about it carefully. Again, it's going to vary quite a lot depending on what county you're in. Do your pesticide costs take into account the increasing problem with herbicide-resistant weeds? The answer to that is yes. What we do is summarize records from FBFM. So it's the actual pesticides cost, and as you can see, those have been rising in recent years, and herbicide-resistant weeds are a major or a part of that. So yes, those are included in there.
Again, the point is that we do base on records to start out from, which is an average. And again, that can vary again a fair amount from farm to farm, even on that particular cost, whether you're using fungicide or not, which is $25 an acre, or whether you have to apply additional chemicals because of some of the weed problems that you have. So there could be I suppose, $20, $35 difference per acre on a soybean or cornfield, depending on the program that's going on for that operator on that particular field. But this is a pretty good starting base sound in what we see out there as far as an average anyway on these chemical costs. And they have been increasing over time, as you mentioned.
Was thinking that we've come to the end of our time, unless you have one more thing to add. Thank you to Dale Lattz and to Gary Schnitkey for being with us. And thanks, of course, to Jim Baltz, who's behind the wheel today and driving things there. He does a great job for us. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason, wishing you a very good day and a great weekend.